Police officers, what stupid things have people nervously said around you and instantly regretted? Not a police officer, but the person who nervously said something stupid. Was 16, super naive, and driving home after a late night studying with my friends at Barnes& Noble. Taking back roads home. It's dark and no one else is out, so I roll through a stop sign. Police officer turns on his lights and pulls me over. He asked me if I had been drinking. Shocked, I said, "Excuse me, officer, I'm 16. That's illegal." Made me get out and do the whole breathalyzer and coordination test rigmarole. Probably thought I was being a little crap, but I honestly didn't realize anyone my age drank. Got off with a warning. Edit. For the non-US people, we can get our driver's license at 16, and a learner's permit at 15. So the funny part isn't that I outed myself as an underage driver, but that I was such a giant nerd that in the moment, I didn't even consider that it was possible for underage, less than 21, people to drink alcohol, and was confused that the police officer didn't know this. Edit. The warning was for failing to come to a complete stop at a stop sign. A warning is like a ticket, but there are no fines and it doesn't go on your driving record, as far as I'm aware. Story 2. Ex-NSW police officer, Australia. Craploads. To give you guys some background, NSW police can pull people if they feel like it for a random breath test, RBT. No reason is required. You're not allowed to search the car without reasonable suspicion that they've committed an offense though, so sometimes you just ask some questions to see if they crack. More just for fun. One really sticks out to me. I pulled over a car full of young blokes, all about 17. The driver is super nervous. I mean, nervous enough that he was visibly shaking. I asked the kid if he had anything to drink. He squeaked, "No." I could smell pot as soon as he rolled the window down. This plenty for me to search the vehicle, but I could tell the driver wasn't stoned, but his 3 mates were. I was going to leave it alone. He passed the breatho, so I asked him if he had any drugs in the car. He responds, "Not anymore." Well, F, mate. Ended up getting him out of the car and giving him some advice on talking to the police. Usually just don't. If you've done something stupid, one-word answers and don't admit to anything. And don't drive around carloads of stoned dudes. One will say something dumb eventually. He very nervously thanked me, then very nervously let out a loud fart. I swear he was about to cry. Poor bastard. Story 3. Not an officer, but the idiot in the situation. I was pulled over a few months ago, leaving a popular restaurant/bar in a neighboring town. I had 1 beer and was completely fine. I was in a rental car and didn't know it didn't have automatic headlights like my car. Odd to me because my car is from the 90s and this car was brand new. So it's about 11 p.m. and I'm at a stoplight across from an officer who flashes his lights at me. Well, the light had just changed, so I thought he just wanted me to go ahead and turn, so I did, and he immediately pulls me over. The convo from there. Officer, son, do you know why I just pulled you over? Me, no sir. Officer, I flashed my lights at you to turn yours on and, you didn't. Me, oh, I'm sorry, officer. Here's my license. Officer, okay, be right back. Just have to mark down that I stopped you. He then showed me how to turn the lights on because I hadn't the slightest idea. Me, no problem, officer. Just so you know, though, this totally isn't my car. Officer stops and looks at me. What now? Me, oh, no, like, it's a rental. Holds rental papers out the window. Like, I didn't steal it or anything, just thought you should know. No one has ever looked at me like I was so stupid in my life. Story 4. I have 2. First was a suspicious person behind a business that had been burglarized a bunch of times in the past. Me, what's your name? Suspect, Jonathan. Me, okay, how do you spell it? Suspect, Jothnathan. My name is Robert, and I have a warrant. Second was a traffic stop. Driver is in tears, begging me not to give him a speeding ticket since he was going to have his license suspended. Me, tell you what, if you have any information about something more serious than this ticket, I'll give you a warning. Driver, a couple buddies and I broke into a bunch of cars by Main Street. Me, you've got to be crapping me. Driver, I swear, all the stuff we took is at my friend's house. Turns out the driver was part of a group that was going through the cars that were unlocked. We ended up arresting 4 people, 2 adults, 18 years old, and 2 juveniles. They all went to jail for a few years, but I kept my promise and did not give the driver a ticket. Story 5. Had a friend who'd just gotten her license and was pulled over for RBT, and she was incredibly nervous only because it was all new to her. The officer held out the breathalyzer and said count to 10. She goes, "Yep," then is silent for a bit before the officer has to say, "Out loud please, ma'am." Oh, right, sorry. 1, 2, edit. Just gonna clarify because a number of people are asking. In New South Wales, Australia, 1, RBT stands for random breath testing. Basically, an officer will pull over cars at random, or there might be a small group of police cars along the highway that make passerby pull in for a breath test. 2, the breathalyzer we use here aren't the ones you blow into. You just talk and it picks it up off your breath. Story 6. In law enforcement, but not a regular cop. Middle of a search warrant looking for a bloke. Lots of drug convictions in the past. Found a still burning blunt in the ashtray in the living room, but no sign of the guy in the house. I'm 99% sure he's in the roof cavity. I announced to my partner, I think he's up there. Should we look? Suddenly, the ceiling starts talking. Hear the softest, no, crap, they can hear me. Nah, it's all good. So my partner said, nah man, I didn't hear that guy say we shouldn't look up there. Ceiling replies with, sweet, I knew they wouldn't find me. Needless to say, we looked and pulled a very, very stoned guy out from under the insulation bats. Side note, they make you itchy AF, so be careful choosing your hiding spots when you're stoned. Story 7. Pulled over a vehicle driving suspiciously slow and swerving on a highway late at night. Walking up to the car, he seems to be reaching under the seat. Knock on the window. Do you know why I pulled you over, sir? Him. I don't know. Speeding? No. Do you know how fast you were driving? Him. No. Me. 15 miles per hour. Him. Oh, well, I wasn't speeding. Me. Yes, sir, but you crossed the center line multiple times and he seemed like you were looking for something. Him, with a big smile on his face, high as crap. Ah, yeah, I dropped my blunt. Regret immediately consumes his face. I can't help but laugh. Get out of the car, please. He steps out. Me. Any other drugs in the vehicle? Him. No, sir. What about that bag on the passenger seat next to the bowl? Him. Ah, F, I forgot I left that there. I'm internally dying from laughter. Take his license, and he's effing 17. I'm like, alright, bud, you got your parents' phone number? Him. Yeah, please don't call my parents. No choice, bud. I'm not taking you to jail for weed. I'll let your parents take care of it. Dump your weed in the ditch, lol. You know, even though this kid was high as a kite, he was honest at least initially before he slipped up about the blunt. So yeah, let him off, and who knows, I mean, the parents might come down on him harder than the law. Story 8. I was passing a friend, being an idiot, on a 4-lane road. Out of nowhere, this other car jumped out in front of me and caused me to have to gun it and swerve over into the other lane and past the dude who'd pulled out, narrowly avoiding clipping my friend's car, who wasn't as attentive to what was going on as I was. I saw the cop driving the opposite way, but didn't even get to hesitate and still pull off the timing I needed to. The cop stops, turns around in the middle of the road, and turns on his lights. I saw him turn around and was already pulled over before he had even turned his lights on. I was then parked at a gas station. He says, "What were you doing?" "I was trying to avoid a collision, sir." "You were driving recklessly. Don't give me that bullcrap." "Sir, if I'd not swerved, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. That other car absolutely pulled out in front of me without checking." "Huh, I can't say for sure what happened because I didn't see it, but I don't ever want to see you driving like that again." Then, somewhere in my brain, the next logical thing for me to say was, "Well, I was speeding." "What the F did you just say?" was my reaction to myself. The cop, completely perplexed by my confession, looked at me with his head cocked to the side, not unlike a dog that's trying to figure out what the baby talk noises you're making are supposed to mean. He then turned around, sat down in his cruiser, and drove away. I then sat there staring blankly out the window, people walking past me going into the station. I could only put my head down on the steering wheel like the moron that I am. Story 9. I got hit head-on by a drunk driver years ago in front of a rural truck stop. Dude was out of his car and getting coffee in the diner practically before his car stopped moving. Insanely quick. He stays in there while other drivers are trying to get me out of my truck. Jammed door. I'm bleeding from several different places, crying, scared, etc. Finally, I'm tucked away in the ambulance while Mr. F-Head is being pushed into the cruiser. He asks the officer if I'm okay. Pissed the cop off. He shouted that it would have been nice to find that out before he ran into the diner, and how he's not falling for the sudden nice guy crap. It made me laugh through my tears. To add, I was 19 and am now 44. I've had back surgery related to this accident and will always have back problems due to it. He caused me lifelong medical issues and couldn't even be bothered to stick around. I hope he got cirrhosis. Story 10. Not a cop, but I was walking home at 2 a.m. a few years ago, about 15 minutes away from my place, when a cop came up behind me in a cruiser, crossed into the opposite lane just to pull me over. I was walking on the sidewalk. The whole thing actually made me laugh, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw the flashing lights, heard the siren, and saw this cop haul ass across the street to pull me over. When he rolled down the window to get my attention, I asked, "Sorry, officer, was I speeding?" He did not find it funny. He kept me for 30 minutes in the cold harassing me. He kept asking me if I had cocaine on me, or knew how to easily get it. Either he was determined to bust me for something at that point, or just wanted to buy cocaine. Edit. Okay, little more info on what happened. He didn't detain me, but considering he found a reason to pull me over, probably a slow night, and I was the only living soul he'd seen the past 15 minutes, I wanted to make sure he was the one who decided the conversation was over. I had nothing on me, I hadn't been drinking, and I did nothing wrong. If some of you are thinking I still should have been worried, this happened in Ontario, Canada. When he pulled me over, he asked what I was doing. I was walking back from my girlfriend's. My car was in the shop that week. The cops started trying to poke holes in my story, asking about where does she live, saying that he didn't believe I could walk that far, etc. My only hope at this point was to be friendly with my answers, and he would get bored and drive away. It was February, and I'm sure he was cold sitting there with his window open. I told him the transit system around here was crap, and I was used to walking those distances. He didn't buy it, but moved on with the conversation. He went through the routine, asking me my name, where I lived, etc. I gave him everything he needed. He then asked what I did for a living. I had just gotten out of film school and just did some crappy PA work at that time, so I told him, "Oh, you're in the film business. You must have cocaine on you then." What? This is when he kept asking about the cocaine. Did I have any on me? Did I know people who did it? What my drug connections were? I bet a lot of people do cocaine in the film business. He was trying to see if I would slip up and say the wrong thing. All I could say was, "I think you watch too many movies." He doesn't like this answer, but he hasn't detained me. We're just having a conversation. The cop continued to stare at me before saying, "So, you love Tim Hortons?" I was so confused by this, and he could probably tell. He then pointed to my winter hat. I was literally wearing one of those stupid promotional hats that Tim Hortons gave away at the time. The hat wasn't even mine, it was my girlfriend's. It had randomly started snowing that night, and she didn't want my head to be cold, so she gave it to me to wear. I honestly thought it was just a black hat, and had no idea it had said anything. This is where we hit the 30-minute mark, so I said to the cop, "Hey, if you really want to search me, you can. I can even show you my ID again. It's cold, and I still want to get home tonight." He stared at me for a good long minute. He had that face that kids usually get when they're told to stop doing something wrong. They know they should stop, but they want to let you know they're not stopping because you told them to. It's because they want to stop on their own. Then he rolled up the window and drove off. Story 11. I once was pulled over with a car full of friends while I was a teenager. We were going out of town for a music festival at the time, so the car was packed with gear and supplies. Cops end up pulling us out of the car, starting with myself and the friend riding passenger. We get pulled to the back of the car and patted down, and while the cop was searching my friend, he suddenly pulls a pill bottle out of his pocket. "What's this for?" My friend turns white as a ghost and mutters something under his breath to the officer. "Herpes," repeats the cop embarrassingly loud as he puts the pill bottle back in his pocket. From that day on, the friend was named Gutternuts. Story 12. I was the one who said the stupid thing. I was 16 and my friends and I were just driving around town. My friend S was driving and he didn't have a license, but my other friend C, who was in the passenger, did, but was letting S drive. Well, we got pulled over and S immediately jumps in back, and C in the driver's seat. Cop comes up and asks for all our IDs, and I hand it over and say, "Are we getting searched?" The cop looks at me and says, "Now you are." So he gives all my friends a little pat, and they walk to the squad car to wait. I try to follow, but he signals to me to stay and makes me put my hands on the vehicle. I was a little nervous, even though I didn't have anything on me. Well, he's making his way down, and he's around my crotch area and asks, "Anything sharp down there that might poke me?" And me, being a smart-ass teenager, says, "Well, if you keep touching like that, there might be, officer." Not even a chuckle from him. Just my friends. We got off with the warning, though. Yeah, silence is golden. Shut up, guys. If you get pulled over, detained by an officer, zip your lips. My goodness. Story 13. I work at a criminal defense firm. People always say they've had 2 beers when they're caught drunk driving, as if having 1 or 3 would make a difference. The drunkest skunk on earth has had 2 beers. The lightest lightweight has had 2 beers. For some reason, it's a go-to line. The correct answer is, am I being detained and may I call my attorney? When asked to do all the tests for the DUI, people literally say, "I couldn't do this if I were sober." All the time. Hell, you can tell them you have bad balance, a bad knee, don't know how to count, can't understand commands because you never went to school, but don't use the excuse that you're not sober, and that's complicating things. When you run, fight, spit, or endanger a cop or the public in any way while you're getting arrested, you get more crimes added to your first one, like eluding, assault on a police officer, or obstruction. Now your misdemeanor has turned into a felony because for some reason you thought you would be the only person ever to outrun a cop. I'm telling you, out of a million criminals, about 0.00001% don't get found. The rest need attorneys. When you are caught, you assume that the cops are your friends, and if you just tell the truth, everything will be okay. The cops are wonderful people, but their job is to investigate and solve crimes, and if you're in their custody, they think you've committed a crime. They're already looking to trip you up with interrogation. This is what they get paid to do. The only thing you should talk to a cop about if you're in handcuffs or in custody is the weather and the condition of the roads, and most importantly, may I please see an attorney? Even the cheapest attorney on earth who doesn't know their ass from their elbow can help you when you haven't screwed your case at the start. Once you do, you're looking at paying a lot to get out of something you just extra effed up. Story 14. Sheriff's deputy here. I work in my jail's booking facility and deal 100% with freshly arrested prisoners. For every person who was charged and arrested for a crime that night, a new charge, not a warrant, they have to go see probable cause court. This means within a few hours of being booked in, and basically the judge reviews the facts and A, determines if there is enough probable cause to charge them, and B, raises or lowers their bond. If no PC is found, the case is dismissed and they're immediately released. One day, this young kid, 17 or 18, was arrested on the street after several homeowners reported suspicious behavior near their house. The patrol officers showed up and questioned him. While that was happening, one officer noticed a backpack laying down near a tree about 50 feet away. Upon searching the bag, he found about 50 grams of ecstasy, heroin, and pills, like Adderall and whatnot. At this point, the officer arrests him for possession of a controlled substance and brought him to jail. $20,000 bond right there. Once this prisoner gets in front of the probable cause judge, the judge reads the case and motions to dismiss it because the kid wasn't seen by the officers with the bag. He was only in the general vicinity, of which it isn't a crime and isn't possession necessarily. Once the judge tells the kid he's going to be released on no PC, the kid asks how long that will take, where he's being released to, and if he can get his backpack back. Read that last part. He asked if he can get his backpack back, but the only backpack that was on him was the backpack full of drugs. He didn't come in with a different backpack on his back. So the judge calls him back and asked him what he said, and he repeats himself verbatim, again asking if he'll get his backpack back. To keep a long story short, the judge decided not to dismiss the case and instead charged him with the possession charge he was brought in on. Story 15. Not so much said nervously, more inebriatedly. It's a word now. Me to obviously drunk kid. Hey bud, you want a ride to your barracks? Steve, made up name. F you. Me. Okay, and we're turning the lights on. Let me see your ID. Steve, I don't have an ID. Me. Okay, well, you came through the gate 100 meters back. Did you lose it? Steve, I guess. Me. Well, why don't you take out your wallet and look? Steve opens wallet and glances at it. Nope, no ID. Me. What are all those barcoded cards? If you can't produce ID, then I have to assume you're sneaking into a military installation. Steve. Oh, yeah, it's my ID. Me. What are the other two? Steve. My other ID. Me. Let me see them all. All three had obvious marks on DOB. One was obviously not him. Me. Does this one say you were born in 1916? Steve. Yeah, I guess. Me. So you're 89 years old? You look 12. That's pretty amazing. Me. Why do you have somebody else's license? Steve. No, that's me. Me. So you're an 89-year-old shapeshifter. Steve. Well, no, that one is my dead sorority brother. Me. Sorority brother? That's a new one to me. Steve. He's my brother in the guy sorority. Me. You don't know what a sorority is, do you? Steve. Stands there while the gears spin. Me. Okay, look, I have crap to do, so let's start over. Hi, I'm Patrolman Wax My Butt. Why do you have somebody else's ID? Steve. I don't. Me. Okay, turn around. A simple thank you after offering him a ride would have avoided all the issues. I didn't even care that he was underage and drunk. I don't think he instantly regretted it. Most likely not until the next day. Story 16. Obligatory not a cop, but I was pulled over late at night on the Monday of Memorial Day weekend, driving back to college. I'd been going maybe 5 mph over the speed limit. The police officer pulled out from the median and tailed me through the toll booth I had to go through for my exit, and then pulled me over immediately afterwards. He strolled up, using his flashlight to illuminate my car. It was a crappy old Honda Prelude with a bumper sticker that said car bomb. This was pre 9/11. He gave me a song and dance about pulling me over because I had my brights on. They weren't. Basically, just an excuse to make a contact, since traffic was very light. After asking me to flip back and forth between my regular and high beams, and asking a bunch of other random questions, he dropped this one. So, when's the last time you smoked cannabis? My bowels instantly turned to water. Of course, I was carrying, but I was sober at the time. Always wait to come down before driving, kids. I stammered out something along the lines of, "Oh, I haven't smoked for months. It really messes with my grades, so I gave it up." Okay, well, the reason I'm asking is that I'm looking at the floorboard of the passenger seat and I see what looks to be cannabis. So I look at where he's indicating and then lean over to pick up what, even to me, looks like a dried nug. I uncrumple it and realize it's just a maple leaf. Well, I live under a tree. I live next to a tree, and I park my car under a tree. To this day, I have no idea how I got out of that one with just a verbal warning. Story 17. Prefacing with not a police officer. Was the driver, yada yada. Still, this story is pretty damn dumb. So, my best friend was having a nervous breakdown in Portland, and at the time, I lived in Marysville, 30 minutes north of Seattle, and she called me at 7 p.m. to tell me of this. So, of course, I take off and go to meet her, and I'm freaking out internally. I don't want her to unalive herself or anything, but I'm so hungry. So, I stopped to get a couple tacos at a nearby Taco Bell before hitting the road for real. So, I'm trying to eat them on the freeway when around Everett, I get pulled over. I had been swerving because my wheel and tire alignment had been off for a while, and normally with two hands it was fine, but trying to eat vaguely Mexican food in one hand was not. So the cop had rightful suspicion to think I was intoxicated. Luckily for me, I'm a very, very unassuming white girl. Unluckily, I have really, really bad anxiety around authority. And most of all, I was scared my best friend may hurt herself. So in a gruff voice, he asked me if I'd been drinking, and I start sobbing grossly, with snot and everything, and say nearly intelligibly, "I'm sorry, sir, I tried to eat tacos and I failed." Maybe that's when he saw the Taco Bell bag. Or maybe he saw me and gave me a break. But he let me go with a stern warning not to eat behind the wheel. And I didn't touch the tacos again until I was in Portland with my best friend. She's good now. Story 18. Not the officer. I was sitting in the car waiting for it to warm up. Two officers pull up in an unmarked car and ask what I was doing, then asked if I have any drugs, knives, guns, bombs, WMDs, or tanks in the car. I laughed and said, well, none of those, but I have some RPGs in my trunk, but it's cool, I have a permit. Thank God the nicer officer was in the driver's seat and started laughing while the other one, kinda pissed, went to get out of the vehicle. Nice cop drove off. For the record, law enforcement apparently asks that random question to judge your reaction when they're out looking for small stuff, drugs, guns, etc. If you have nothing to hide, usually the common thing is to laugh, but if you're all serious, odds are they'll probably try and search your car. Story 19. Obligatory not a cop, but when I was a teenager, I hit a car while parking and called the cops on myself to contact the owner. So after nearly an hour, they show up. They asked me if I had been drinking, which I hadn't. He took out a flashlight and looked at my eyes, then said, "Lift your fingers to my nose." I was very confused, but I thought he meant like the height of his nose or whatever. So I'm standing there, finger raised, feeling like an idiot, and he goes, "Now touch it." Now I'm absolutely baffled, but I also don't want to not follow his orders, you know? And very slowly, I go in for his nose, looking like E.T. with the index finger stretched out. After about 5 seconds, just before I touch it, he leans slightly backwards, avoids my touch, and says, with the air of someone witnessing true stupidity, "No, not my nose, kid, your nose." See, in German, those sound pretty similar. I'm instantly dying of embarrassment. His partner is howling, and he just gives me a dead stare, maybe trying to figure out if I'm effing with him or not. Still didn't have to do any further tests, though. Guess they figured I really was just being dumb. Story 20. Not an officer. Was pulled over at 16. Had been at a party, but I didn't drink. However, my best friend in the passenger seat was hammered. Officer said he smells alcohol, and in an instant I'm saying, well, it's not me. He just told us to go home. Being an athlete in a town of 3,000 people paid off, I suppose. Another friend married a cop. She was bringing him to the bar to meet us for the first time. Best friend from the first story, S, came but wasn't told beforehand that the new boyfriend was a cop. Cop and friend get to the bar before us, see us pull in and start walking toward our car. S jumps out and starts taking a piss on the rear tire. We had been drinking on the way up. Third buddy was driving. Legal at the time. Realizing what he's doing, I say, by the way, new boyfriend is a cop. He zips as quickly as he could. New boyfriend didn't shake his hand, but laughed off the public urination. Later, S kept trying to get new boyfriend's number to use as a reference for PO jobs he was applying for. Didn't score the number. Story 21. Used to go on a few ride-alongs for a college course. Got a call about someone hiding under vehicles. We rolled up, sure as crap, saw someone lying under a Bronco. We called him out, and he told us someone was chasing him through the neighborhood. Yeah, okay. Anyhow, halfway through his story, a car rolls by and half a handful of guys in it stare at him and us, so we know it's probably true. As the cop is talking to the kid, he wanted to just turn him over to his family and get on about the day. He asks about this kid as a formality, "Do you have anything on you?" Kid says, "Well, I have a bag of weed in my pocket." Huh? So the obvious follow-up question is, "And is that why you're being followed?" Kid says yes, that he stole it. At this point, the officer and I are exchanging incredulous looks. So yeah, that was kind of stupid of him. Now the cop really just wants to get on with his day, so he offers the kid to arrest/release him. Just confiscate the weed. Seriously, it was a good pound or so, and release this kid to his parents. So we take him into custody and to where this kid says is home. Kid walks through the front door and says to the woman cooking in the kitchen, "Hi, Mom," to which she replies, "What do you mean, Mom?" I've never seen a grown man express the "holy crap, are you effing kidding me" look like this officer at that exact moment. Ending to the story, we arrest the kid, bring him down to juvie, and turn in the evidence. That officer seriously wanted to just wash his hands of this minor. To him, offensive possession with enough to qualify for intent to distribute of just weed. But no, this kid had to F it all up and make it bad for himself. So those are the dumbest nervous thing I've seen, and he may not have instantly regretted it, but it came around pretty quick. Story 22. My sibling's car broke down on the side of the road and was parked maybe 3 feet off the curb on a side street, one that was just residential and had practically no traffic. A cop saw it and called my sister, telling her if we didn't come and move it, he was going to tow it. My sister didn't have a vehicle, of course, because it was broke down, so I had to go deal with it. I showed up and the plan was to push it, but then I realized I didn't have the keys and it was locked. The officer was making a huge deal about it and being a big jerk, so I said, well, since this is such a major safety hazard, we can just lift the back end up and move it closer to the curb. The front end was already close enough, and it was a light car. The officer got pissed and started threatening me with all sorts of citations and stuff. So then he made me drive the half hour to go get the keys. Meanwhile, the whole time I was supposed to be at work. When we finally got done moving it, I asked for his name and badge number, and he wasn't impressed. When I left, he followed me for a mile or two, tailgating me to try to scare me or something, lol. Story 23. Not a cop, and I barely said one word, but I still felt instant regret. In high school, my friends and I only had our third period class every other day. On the days we didn't have it, we'd drive to go eat somewhere and just come back in time for fourth period. We'd usually argue over who would drive and just force a certain person pretty much every time. Him being already annoyed he has to drive all the time, and also having 4 obnoxious teenagers in his car, he was easily agitated and would lock the windows if we ever tried to roll them down. It got to a point where the windows would just stay locked, and subconsciously we kind of just knew the windows were not an option. Well, one day, on the way back for our final class, we got pulled over. Officer wanted the back window rolled down for whatever reason. He looked at me through the window and asked, "Son, can you roll the window down?" At which point my response was to just laugh because somehow, subconsciously, rolling down the window was so forbidden. I didn't even think it was an option at that point, I guess. My friend then rolled down the window and the cop asked if I was on drugs, which I replied with no, of course, accompanied by totally unnecessary laughter. He somehow believed me, but I felt like an idiot ever since. Story 24. I used to skateboard on campus with a bunch of other guys when I was a teenager. It was illegal and we knew it, but we still did it anyway, knowing the cops had never caught us before. Ran away many times. This time, we were skating near the architecture building and accidentally hit a professor while we were doing backflips off of a ledge. This guy was understandably upset, and there just happened to be a cop nearby. The professor waves him over and the cop starts asking for our names. The buddy gives a fake name, but I was so nervous that I gave my real name. It's an incredibly generic name, and as soon as I said it, my buddy looks at me like, "What the F, dude?" But the cop was like, "Yeah, right, you think I believe that? Next time, make up a more believable name." Yeah, I mean, I guess that's one of the rare instances to have a name like John Smith or Michael Jones or something like that actually pays off, right? Like, I'm not saying name your kids these wildly outlandish things, but it's like if your last name is Smith, don't name your kid John. Come on. Story 25. Some doper sitting on his porch smoking a bowl or whatever calls in that he's watching a guy going down the street burglarizing the whole neighborhood. Haul ass, get there, suspect's fled on foot. Left behind his car full of stolen goods, though. Gets located a few moments later, running down the road trying to get back to his house. We jump out on him, throw cuffs on, surprise, surprise, it's our area's most prolific burglar kid. One of the more wise-ass cops recognizes him, sighs, and tells him, "Dude, you must be the world's worst effing burglar ever." Kid looks back at him all pissed off and shouts, "You didn't catch me with the last 30 burglaries I just did, though." Everyone cracks up. Wise-ass tells him, "That's going in the report." "Nuh-uh, I didn't just say that." Remember, kids, don't pop Xanny bars and then go burglarizing, or you're gonna have a bad time. Story 26. I've been pulled over numerous times. I don't like speed limits, so normally it's just me going 10 to 15 over. Because my daily is a 3/4 ton 4x4 truck, I generally pull very far over on the shoulder, enough the officer has to worry about people sideswiping him, or I completely exit the highway and pull into a parking lot. I try to bring up something to the effect that they need a pullover lane that makes it safer for the officer in conversation, and tell him it's just too darn unsafe for them out there. I also don't deny I was speeding. 9 out of 10 times, this tactic gets me off with a warning. Or there was the one time I had an officer laugh. For backstory, I'll tell you I'd been out of town working for 2 weeks. It was hell, and I had pulled some very long hours. The officer walks up, asks me if I know why I was pulled over, and I say, sure, I was speeding. To be honest, officer, no disrespect, but I've got a lot of problems, and right now, money ain't one of them. I haven't seen my wife and kids in 2 weeks, and I just want to get home and see them. He laughed, took my info, came back and told me, I'm letting you off with a warning. Just slow it down so you can make it home to see them. I thanked him and told him to be safe out here, and we parted ways. Cops are people too. Some are a-holes, and some are decent people you'd be able to have a beer with. Thanks, guys. Be safe out there, because there's a lot of crazy in the world. Story 27. This doesn't fit the question well, but it was funny. My friends and I went bar hopping and got in a big fight. Someone fired a gunshot and everyone ran. The area is filled with cops. On our way to our car, parked far away, we ran into a guy that we initially fought with. A friend knocked him back down and we went to our car. Friend driving decided he was too drunk and didn't want to drive. A cop winds up walking up to our car, asking if we know anything about the fight and shot. The officer opened the door, looked in the car, and started asking my friend to step out of the driver's seat. Out of nowhere, the guy who had been knocked down a few minutes before pushes his way past the cop and starts swinging on my friend still in the driver's seat. The officer body slams the guy, looks at us, and told us to get out of here. We assumed we'd all be in jail since it was clear we had been in a fight given our clothing and bloodstains. I still thank that idiot for the save. Story 28. Not a cop, but a friend of mine had to visit the USA for business-related reasons. We're Germans. And when he came back, he had a story to tell. First, he didn't want to go to the USA, but had to. His boss insisted. So he was pissed all the time over there. Girlfriends, and his dad's birthday was in that 2 weeks he was there. Now, the highway rules in Germany are different, and one day, girlfriend's birthday, he rushed home and forgot that he wasn't in Germany and got pulled over because of speeding and overtaking a police car. So he tried to talk himself out of speeding like, "Oh, I'm German. I forgot that I drive here in miles per hour, not kilometers." Well, the cop didn't buy and the stress began. Soon, my friend snapped and yelled something like, "It's not my fault that your effing Stone Age country uses that retarded measurement system. I mean, miles, feet, inches, Fahrenheit? How effed up is this country?" He told us that the cop arrested him, also called backup. Friend spent 2 nights in jail, missed girlfriend's birthday, and the appointment why his boss sent him to the USA. Of course, he got fired for that. He's a nice guy, but sometimes also an idiot. Look, not condoning breaking the law at all, but it's like, if you want to be especially careful about breaking the law, don't do it when you're abroad. I mean, come on. The absolute last thing that you want to do is get detained in a foreign country. Come on, man. Be better. Story 29. Pulled over for speeding while my speedometer didn't work. I was about 17. Cop walks up and asked me how fast I was going, and I said, "Sorry, sir, I don't know. My speedometer isn't working right." He said, "And I bet it just stopped working a couple minutes ago, huh?" He was trying to help me and let me off the hook, but I thought he was making fun of me somehow. "Actually, it hasn't worked for years, officer. Didn't even work before my dad gave it to me." He started laughing, and I got so red in the face when I realized what I just did. He said, "Son, what's your dad's phone number? Can I call him?" You think he's busy? I reluctantly gave him the number. My mind is racing and I have no idea what's about to happen. I'm wondering if he's going to somehow arrest my dad over the phone. I just have no clue. My face is so hot that my ears hurt at this point. So he called and explained what happened, and I can hear my dad howling, laughing over the phone. Ha! That sounds about right. The officer is still laughing, tears welling up in his face. You should have seen his face. He thought he had me. Years, he said. Hold on, let me put you on speaker. And my dad says, well, you got no choice but to haul him off now. You know how many years he's gonna get? Lawn's gonna get awful long. Cop replies, sir, you didn't mention the lawn. I can't lock him up when there's a lawn to be mowed. Sentence is 2 years of landscaping, bright and early every Saturday morning, or something like that. I can call the judge and see what he thinks? And I just shake my head like a wet dog because if I talk, I'm gonna cry. Dad says, I guess we can keep him a little longer. Sorry to bother you, officer. Officer tells me that respect is much more important than you think it is, young man. If I was having a worse day, you'd have a ticket. Relax and be respectful to your fellow man, cop or not. And I mowed the F out of that lawn. Story 30. The stupid one was me. I was flying from Wichita home on an international flight. At the gate, my mom calls me and yells at me. She can get these tantrums, and she was yelling so loud I could see people looking at me thinking, poor girl. So I'm shaken by this, especially since I got yelled at for something I didn't do, and I was unable to fix it in the moment. An officer saw me, and I guess he figured something was up. Asked me to step away with him. Starts asking all these questions, which I had a hard time answering because I was near crying. He asked why I was so nervous. I reply, I don't want to give you a wrong answer. Then he goes, can I see some ID? And I reply, which one do you want? I moved out of my birth country in my teen years, so I have several nationalities. He looks at me going, what the F? Takes a look at my passport, which has stamps from short stays with time spans of 6 months in between. I'm thinking at this point he thought I was a drug mule or something. Ma'am, please open your bag. I did. Am I going to find anything illegal in here? And I went, depends on what's illegal in this country. Seriously, I wasn't trying to be a jerk, but in retrospect, I did ask for it. He found nothing in my bag and let me go, but he did keep an eye on me until we boarded the plane. Story 31. Not a cop, but I was pretty lucky. I used to work late at a hotel bar. I finished about 3 a.m. and was en route home quite quickly as the roads were empty. I reached a roundabout and did come to a stop as I could see it was empty before I arrived. About 2 miles later, a police car appears behind me and flashes me to the side of the road. I hadn't actually been doing anything wrong, so I got out of the car with a bit of a stank face on. He explains he'd seen me drive out the roundabout a bit fast and assumed it was drunken confidence, so he asked me to do a breathalyzer test. I do it, and as we're standing, the 5 or so seconds for it to beep, I realize I've had one drink at the end of my shift while cleaning down. Not enough to put me over the limit, but enough to be registered after me having said I've had nothing to drink this evening. So I let out a massive sigh. The officer then looks at me and says, got something to add? I then sort of panicked and rather than admit my mistake, double down and say, no, it's just freezing and I've worked a 12-hour shift at Christmas and I'm back there in less than 8 hours and now some idiot's pulling me over despite me doing nothing wrong. He shoots me an eyebrow like, oh really? You've got balls, haven't you? I then realize I've called him an idiot unintentionally just as he's about to call me out on a lie. So I decided, F it. I actually just remembered a second ago when I sighed. I've had one drink when I finished, hence why I just said the stupid crap. He laughs. Explains that he'd just been warned of some drivers leaving a rural nightclub that were definitely over the limit in a car that matched my description heading the same route. As if by magic, a car's headlights appear down the same road, see me pulled over next to the police car, and decelerate and hastily try to make a left turn before passing us. They wouldn't have been suspicious if they'd carried on, but the sound of the car braking hard and then, but only then, indicating left and quickly turning. The police officer wishes me a Merry Christmas, jumps in the car, and pulls a U-ey to catch back up with the clearly steaming driver. I had actually had 2 drinks and was probably over the limit anyways. A punter had also bought me one. The other was put in my hand by a manager. Lucked out that night, I think, in multiple ways. Story 32. Found a missing person out of our town after a busy bar night. The guy said he didn't remember what happened, but he woke up in a pickup truck that wasn't his. I figure he climbed in the bed and passed out. He went on to tell me he woke up in the driver's seat. Then, since the pickup was a stick shift, he tried kickstarting it. Went from a welfare check to auto theft/burglary investigation real quickly. Another time, a guy gets in a single car accident into a tree. No seatbelt. The guy is conscious and talking without any visible injuries. After talking to him, he was extremely confused and didn't understand what had happened. We figured DWI or head trauma, so we had to get him to the hospital. While sitting in his car waiting for the rig, I asked if he had a cell phone. He began going through his pockets and pulls out a Ziploc from his front pocket. I asked what it was, and he replies, "It's the weed that..." I promptly took it from him, and you can figure out the rest. Story 33. Not a police officer, but one of the folks who freak out. One time I was speeding in a residential area and really had no idea. I was a brand new driver and really used to driving my beater car that creaked and struggled any time I went over 35 mph, but I had borrowed a friend's car because my beater was in the shop, and I was going 40 in a 25 zone. I started crying and freaking out, and tried to explain how I'm used to my crappy car and don't know how to drive cars that aren't crap, and oh my god, thank you so much for stopping me. Oh my god, I could have hit someone's cat or something. She took pity on me and wrote it up as going 30. P.S. Crying and freaking out is basically my natural state of being, especially if I'm being pulled over. Officers are usually okay with that once I explain I have an anxiety disorder and ask permission to take one of my anxiety pills, which I always have in my purse, because I assume they'll think it's weird if I just pop a pill right in front of them. And then I feel bad because I can't just start driving until I've calmed down because that's not safe, and they have to just wait there until I do because they can't just leave me on the side of the road. I'm positive that pulling me over ruins a cop's day because it takes like an hour of their time, and I'm just sobbing and apologizing and hyperventilating and generally making them feel awkward. But I've only ever gotten that one ticket, despite being pulled over probably 8 or 10 times in my life. So it's basically a superpower. Be so screwed up, cops don't want to kick you when you're down. Also, because I'm white, female, and little. Duh, I'm not blind to my own privilege here. Story 34. Not an officer, but this is funny just the same. After a long night of bar hopping, myself and a few college friends decide to keep the party rolling and head to Windsor, Canada. We're all Americans from Ohio and Michigan. We get our designated driver, yes, we had one, and proceed to finish our drinks before heading north. Our designated driver was, in the easiest of terms, not the brightest bulb in the box. On the way, he gets us lost in downtown Detroit. It's 8 a.m. and we have 4 belligerent young adults wandering around the hood while being shepherded by a complete moron. After 45 minutes, we finally find directions and proceed to the border. As we approach the customs booth, about 8 cars back, the driver says, and I quote, "Oh crap, I didn't realize there was customs here. I got a bunch of coke on me." What the F? Come to find out, our DD is more effed up than we are. He does, however, explain how he managed to stay awake with all of us alcoholics, but this is not the funny part whatsoever. He then proceeds to panic, gets a CD case out, dumps his entire pile of cocaine out, and decides this all must be consumed before the next 3 cars are let through. None of us were interested at all. This crazy ass splits it all into 2 lines, later told just shy of 1/8 of an ounce, and snorts it all in under 5 seconds. Now he's lit, fired up, ready to go. We pull up to customs and the agent shoots him and us like we're all zombies. He rolls down the window, says nothing, stares at her, and waits for the conversation. The border agent says, "What nationality?" which prompts a long, awkward pause from our driver. He finally pipes in with, "I'm not sure. My dad's Italian and my mom is, well, I'm not sure, ma'am. So, honestly, I'm not sure. Keith in the back is black. I mean African American. The rest of these dudes are just plain white." As I sit in the passenger seat, I can't help but bust out laughing and yell, "USA, dumbass!" Needless to say, the agent found none of this humorous. The only other word she spoke was, "Pull over to the right." The next 5 hours of search and interrogation led to 3 of us being allowed in Canada, and our designated driver being held by the Mounties until he sobered up enough to drive home or could find a ride. I was sent back to the US for being on probation and ended up banned from Canada for 10 years. I can guarantee you that this jackass will never forget what nationality he is again. And to be honest, we were all so pissed he pulled that crap that we left his ass there and made him call his parents to come pick him up. If he wasn't going to be punished in Canada, we were more than happy to see him receive some sort of punishment. We were all lucky his bullcrap didn't land us all in Canadian jail, lol. Story 35. Probably gonna get lost in the shuffle, but some years ago was in a suburb of Houston driving down a notorious stretch of highway known for its unsynced red lights. My 2003 Chevy Avalanche was having some issues with the dashboard randomly shutting down while the vehicle was on and moving. I had my iPhone next to a speedometer app sitting on my dash and noticed a city police officer in his cruiser next to me at a light. When it turned green, I slowly accelerated, trying to gauge traffic speed. The cop stayed slow, too, and no one wanted to pass him. After a short distance, he hit his lights and got behind me. First thought, there's no effing way I was speeding. This app had me at 40 and a 55. Second thought, I haven't had anything to drink. What the F? Third thought, just be polite, yes and no answers, etc. Once we pulled safely over, the officer walked up and said, "Good afternoon, sir. Do you know why I pulled you over?" "I don't, sir. Your registration is out." "There's no way. I literally got that done last week." I'm in disbelief at this point. How petty. I'd sat through my registration renewal after having allowed it to expire, so I was effing certain. "I'm sorry, sir. The sticker is not current." Incredulously, I point to the sticker. "What does that say right there?" At this point, God bless the man, he started second-guessing himself. I think, yeah, it's this month, last year." I look and read it. Sure as crap, there it is. Last year and same month. What the F? Lightbulb moment. Oh, crap. Cop. What? Me. It's in my effing, it's in my center console. Cop. Ha. Literally, ha. Go ahead. Grab that. Me. Damn, I'm sorry. Cop. It's alright. Let me run license and everything. Be right back. Walked off shaking his head. We had a good enough laugh about it, and he let me off with a verbal warning to get it fixed. Certainly didn't have to be so kind or patient, but I appreciated the hell out of it. Story 36. One of the stories a friend likes to share of me. We slipped on some country club and ended up going bar to bar, doing a shot each, just being young and dumb. Well, as we were walking from bar 3 to bar 4, I run and tackle him. We roll in the leaves, giggling, totally hammered. Cop R blips the sound for us. Get up, and the cops are in the car. They want to talk to us. We both get to the window, and as the one cop is asking us where we're coming from, the radio dispatch talks about a jeweler theft or robbery. I interject. "Hello, officers. We're just coming from the Diamond District, the Diamond Depository," followed by, "Wow, look at all these lights and buttons in here. Can you guess what happened / my privilege?" Cop 1 gave a subdued giggle. Cop 2 wanted to grab me across his partner, effing rip my face off. But they had bigger fish to fry, and they let us go. But yeah, I admitted to coming from a fresh crime scene. Cops, thankfully, were too busy to waste their time arresting us. Same night, my friend and I walked home 3 hours, walking through the night. Even included laying down on a stretch of highway that had no lights. Quite the night, that one. Story 37. I watched a British true crime documentary, Catching a Killer, The Search for Natalie Hemming, on 40D, a few weeks ago about the investigation of a missing persons report. When the report was made, the police went round to her bloke's house to make a few inquiries about it and have a look around the property. At this point, he wasn't a suspect. It was just routine. They asked him if they could have a look around, and he starts making excuses and asks if they could wait till tomorrow because the kids are in bed. The police are like, "We're trying to locate your missing wife. This is important, isn't it?" He gives in. Then they ask if they can have a look through his phone, and again he starts making excuses that he needs it because people are always trying to reach him, or that Natalie might call. Again, the police are like, "Are you saying you're refusing to give us your phone?" So he's generally not cooperating and not giving straight answers. In front of him, an officer gets a call through on the radio. We don't hear what was said, could have been unrelated. And at this point, because of his continued non-cooperation, the police become suspicious that he's got something to hide. They placed him under arrest on suspicion of murder, and in response to this, he says, "Have you found Natalie then?" Turns out he beat her to death a couple nights ago and dumped her body in a forest. Story 38. This is, I think, about 3 years ago, being 22 and being the smart dumbass that I am. I got pulled over for speeding 50 km an hour over the speed limit. They take your driver's license here for that kind of violation. So the cop pulls me over on his bike. I already knew crap was about to happen. He shows me the radar gun and it says 130, where 80 was allowed. It kind of shocked me because I was not really aware of that kind of violation. I knew I was speeding, but with that margin? He then asked me, "You know what this means?" In my shock, I said, "Yeah, I'm lucky," with some stupid look on my face. I then immediately thought, well, that's not a smart thing to say against an officer of the law. He wasn't expecting that response neither, I guess. He went like, why? Me. Well, because there's a correction of 4 km per hour. Then he said, yeah, but this kind of speed we don't need to see in an 80 zone. Me. Yeah, I know. After this, it's not really interesting, but I felt like, oh god, why would you say that to an officer? Eventually, I didn't lose my DL because of the correction, but still got a point on my DL and had a ticket of 597 euros. Okay, all jokes aside, guys, please be careful with your speeding out there on the road. Like, if you want to be reckless, put your own life at risk, that's your own business, but my god, like, you're endangering so many other people by being so frickin' reckless. Don't do it. Story 39. Not a cop, but when I was 18, I was pulled over one night for a rejection sticker. It was 2 days old, so I still had time to sort it out. I had stupidly put a pipe in my glove box next to my registration and had about a half gram of weed on me. The officer came up to my passenger window and asked me for my license and reg. I reluctantly opened the glove box and grabbed my reg and closed it quickly after. I handed him the reg/license, and then he asked if I had anything I wasn't supposed to have in the car. I took that to mean, I saw the pipe, you moron, now let's see if you're gonna lie straight to my face. So I told him about the pipe and the weed. He took them both and said in what sounded very friendly, "Okay, sit tight and I'll be right back." In my head, I was thinking, okay, it's not so bad. Sounds like he's happy that I was honest with him. From now on, I'll always be honest with police officers. Well, that thought was quickly shut down because when he came back, he went up to my driver's side window, held the pipe out like he was going to give it back to me, and pulled out his baton and started smashing it to bits in front of my face, and then took the bag of weed and dumped it on the ground, as if he turned into a monster and screamed, "If you do it again, you're going to jail. Get the F out of here." Unfortunately, that gave me a pretty bad image of the police, especially at that age, as I felt what he did was extremely unnecessary, and not to mention the broken glass left on the ground in a residential neighborhood. So much for honesty. Look, I'm sorry, OP, you did something stupid, so action warranted. Moving on. Story 40. I worked at a sushi bar, and this cop came in every Friday like clockwork. Order the exact same thing, usually called ahead so he could run in to pick it up and not have to worry about being out of his car for too long. This cop is the one who pulled me over to tell me about the headlight being out. So a week later, teenager me was pulled over for a headlight being out. I knew it was out, I needed to have the wires replaced, and it was going to cost me a chunk of money that I didn't have, so I picked up some extra hours at work to help cover the cost. On my way home from work after picking up dinner, I traded the free sushi my boss gave me for free pizza. I got pulled over. The guy asked, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" It was the same cop that had originally pulled me over to tell me that my headlight was out. I'm tired and cranky. Yeah, man, for the headlight, right? It'll cost $80 to replace it, and I only have about 45 at the moment. So in the morning, I'm going to the mechanic to see if they'll accept half now and half later to get it fixed. The guy stares at me. I stare at him. I'm still in a bad mood because now my dinner's getting cold and work was super stressful. He just says, "Well, as long as you know, I do have to give you a work repair this time, though." Cool, man. I'm gonna eat my pizza while you do that. Do you want a slice while you do that since it's past dinner time? What kind is it? Cheese stuffed crust. Hell yeah, would love a slice. Cool beans, man. Pulled out a paper plate, pull him off a slice, handed it to him. He took it and went to write the repair order. Handed me the ticket. I told him thanks. We went our separate ways. When I got home, my parents were appalled that I gave the cop pizza. I didn't know that it was a bad thing. The dude was a regular where I work, and I knew he missed his usual dinner. Why not offer him food? I'm a complete idiot, it turns out. In other news, cops started bringing friends to the sushi bar to show off his favorite dinner place. Story 41. Not a cop, but an idiot. So picture this. You're almost 8 months pregnant and you've been dying to watch a movie on a book you loved in high school. They have it at your local Redbox, but it's never in stock. For months, you wait patiently for your turn with the movie, until one night you've had enough and decide to road trip with your husband and 2-year-old to every Redbox until you find this movie. You do this for 2 hours until you finally get this movie. Satisfied, you start to drive home. There is a dark wooded stretch of road and you start to feel a little anxious. You watch too many horror movies. You see a car and feel a bit better. They flash their lights at you and you flash back. I thought you weren't supposed to do that, because some gang was picking out victims that way, leaves your husband's mouth. Anxiety level 10. This is the start of a horror movie and you're too pregnant and fat to run. Oh crap, the first people in the movie always die. You think you saw their brake lights go on, as if they're turning around. You keep driving, trying to find civilization before they come back to kill/essay/torture/eat you. You see another car. They repeat the flash. Anxiety level 3000. You're definitely going to die. We're going to die over a movie and we won't even get to watch it. You round a bend and see a half dozen police cars with lights on. You're saved! You begin to sob hysterically in relief as a cop walks to your window. You begin rambling about how you loved this book in high school and just wanted to watch the movie and could-be gang members flash their lights at you and you didn't mean to flash back, and thank you so much, officer, for being here. You were so scared, but it's okay now because there are cops everywhere, and when that happens, the movie's over and everyone is safe. Several other officers have gathered, and now you're just starting to get embarrassed that so many people are seeing your emotional breakdown, but you just cannot shut up. The cop is flabbergasted the entire time and looking into the car with a flashlight. Your 2-year-old was obsessed with cops and screaming, "Mommy, Daddy, look, it's a policeman. He's beautiful." Your husband calmly leans forward from the passenger seat and says, "Sorry, sir, she's 7 months pregnant." Cue more crying that you swear you're not on drugs or crazy and you're sorry that you're taking up their valuable time. Cops are trying desperately not to laugh, and someone hands you a tissue. You have ugly snot cried everywhere. The cop asks your husband to step out for a second, and you ugly cry more from embarrassment. Husband gets back in, and you drive away carefully. Your husband says, "Do you want to know what the cop said?" You nod because your throat hurts from crying. He was scared to upset you anymore, but you need to get your address on your license updated, and people tip other people off about roadblocks by flashing their light at them. Short version, very pregnant me watches too many horror movies. Got scared while driving because people flashed their lights at me. Drove into a roadblock, scared a cop, made others laugh. Turns out people were warning me about said roadblock. Story 42. Not the cop, but the idiot. I was in Honduras for the first time, walking around the plaza and checking things out. The day before, my friend and I had brought a brown paper bag full of local skunk weed for $20, so I was pretty toasted. Well, I get approached by this Honduran cop who's carrying a M16 or something. He asked me something in Spanish, and while I'd had a couple semesters of Spanish, the buzz and the situation made me draw a blank. The best I could figure was that he was asking me for a cigarette, so I pantomimed a cigarette smoking action and raised my eyebrows, attempting to do the body language question. "Are you asking me for a cigarette?" However, instead of using index and second finger, I used thumb and index finger, which made it look like I was asking him for weed, or maybe if he wanted to buy some weed. Something. I quickly realized my mistake and switched to the correct gesture, but it was too late. He just looked at me for a few very long seconds while I pretended not to be crapping myself. Then he grinned, snorted, and walked off. Story 43. Police officer in a big European city. One night, our tax department was checking up a bar because of non-registered workers from Eastern Europe. They quickly called for assistance because they were finding themselves in a bar full of 20 aggressive, drunken Serbian citizens. Long story short, while my colleges are arresting one of the aggressive guys, me and my colleague tried to block the view for the rest of the aggressive Serbian. As you can imagine, they weren't happy seeing their friend being arrested, so one of the guys, who was chirping at us all the time, tried to get past my colleague to interrupt the arrest. My colleague reacted quickly and pushed him back. In front of all his Serbian friends, he wanted to look cool after being pushed by my colleague. He pulled up his sleeves, showed us his fists, and said, translated, "Look out, you piece of crap, let him go," meaning his arrested friend. "Or tomorrow, when you go home not wearing your uniform anymore, I will wait for you when you're alone and I will beat you up, you'll see." That was when I heard enough and grabbed him and pushed him into the wall and cuffed him, and told him he was arrested for, we call it, resistance to the state power. He was suddenly very cooperative, and as we're taking the elevator to the cells later, he started crying, apologizing, saying that he wanted to look cool, and that if he doesn't show up to work tomorrow morning, he'll lose his job because his boss is already mad at him, and he has a wife and kid to feed. Long story short, he lost his job, and half a year later, the judges found him guilty, and he got 4 months prison on probation, which means finding a new job will be a lot harder. Story 44. Late to the game, so this'll get buried. And I'm the person getting pulled over. Fresh out of high school, some friends that I really didn't hang out with much were wanting to find some weed. Well, it's already almost 1 in the morning, but luckily I know a guy that will sell to us this late. Instead of just one person going to get it, we decide we should all hop in the car and go get it. I also picked to drive since I know where the dude's house is. I end up getting pulled over because I did not have my headlights on. Thought they were automatic, like another poster in this thread. The officer asked me if I knew why he pulled me over. "No, sir," I said. "You were driving without your headlights on. Could you not tell?" "Not really, officer. The street lights are bright enough to see." "Where you guys headed tonight?" he asked, and this is where I effed up. I said we were heading back home to my friend's apartment complex, but I pointed in the complete opposite direction of where my apartment complex was. "Isn't such and such apartments that way?" pointing in the correct direction. I just respond with, "Such and such apartments is that way." He just laughed and asked if I had been drinking, which it was obvious I wasn't. Told me to turn on my lights and get home and stay home. Story 35. More of what my sister said as I was being questioned by officers and had a mini panic attack. I leave for work with my older sister in the morning around 4:30 a.m., so I walk out of the house ahead of her to warm up the car. I come out of my house and a police officer turns around the corner of my block, right in front of me. I wave and proceed to turn the corner and walk towards my car. I then look behind me, and the same cruiser busted a U-turn and began going down the same block but in the other direction, passing the intersection I had just turned from. I proceed to sit into the passenger seat and turn on the car since my sister's the driver, and I usually don't like driving in the morning. I also leave my wallet at home because I'd rather not spend money on breakfast or anything. All of a sudden, the same police cruiser now beams around the corner, spotlight on, and just speeds and brakes hard in front of my car. They rush out with flashlights and all and proceed to my window, glaring the flashlight in my face. I greet the officer nicely with a good morning, and he quickly responds with asking for my ID. He began to question me and ask where do I live, where am I going, why I don't have my ID, etc. I told him I wasn't the one driving, and then tell him how I left my ID in my house that he saw me come out of. On top of that, I had my Amazon badge visible and all, and he still began to question me. I became frustrated and called my sister on the phone for her to bring down my ID, telling her about the police stopping me as I'm in the passenger seat warming up the car. She's on speaker and says, "What the F? Are they stupid or just retarded?" And I just looked in fear of what he was going to say or do. He then asked for my name and said I checked out fine since he had run the plates and my name came up with the car I was sitting in. Story 46. I used to be an MP, which is just the military version of a cop. Being the new guy at the time, I had to work the night shift. I found my typical spot to sit near a stop sign that I knew people always drove through. It was about 3 a.m. and I was exhausted. I really just wanted to look like I was doing something. This guy comes flying past me, so I chase him down and pull him over. I got his license and registration from him, and he was absolutely terrified. After running his info, I came back to him and noticed he was sweating profusely. Shirt was wet and everything. He wasn't like that a couple minutes ago. I asked him why he was so sweaty, and he said he had just been dancing in the most sheepish voice. I tried my best not to laugh, and I could tell that he was drunk and now terrified that he would get into some serious trouble. I hated being a cop. I hated ruining people's days/nights, so I let the guy go and followed him from a distance to make sure he could drive okay. Maybe I was a bad cop, but I'm not one anymore and I hope to never be one again. Story 47. My boyfriend and I were the ones being pulled over in this case, not the cops. About 2.5 years ago, I was 16, my boyfriend was 18. My stepdad got drunk one night and, well, you know how stepdads are to their gay sons. So I call my idiot and have him come rescue me and we call the cops. Now, my boyfriend, bless his soul, is not good under pressure, and he's going just a little bit over the speed limit. We get pulled. The cop comes to the window, and before he could even start his "do you know why I pulled you over" bit, my boyfriend goes, "I promise I'm not kidnapping him. He's not here against his will." Cut to me in the passenger side having a panic attack barefoot in a Batman onesie. F you, I was sick and it was the only pajamas I had clean. This poor cop looks so concerned and confused, but we explained to him what was happening and he followed us to my boyfriend's house and we didn't get a ticket. Fun times. Everything's okay with my mom and stepdad now, by the way. I don't live there, but I visit often and it's all cool now. Story 48. I was the idiot in this situation. I worked at a day camp one summer, and we'd have the kids sleep over every Thursday night. As an employee, this meant not sleeping much and yelling at 30 10 to 13-year-olds to get the F back to their tents and sleep, and then making them breakfast and instructing them all day. One Friday, on the way home, I'm tired as F, going down this hill where the speed limit goes from 50 mph to 25 mph, again on a downhill portion of road. A man jumps out from behind a tree at the bottom and waves me onto a side street. As I approach, I notice he's a police officer wearing short shorts and holding a radar gun. Him. Do you know why I pulled you over? Me. Not really. Him. You want to explain to me why I clocked you going 43 and a 25? Me. Stares up blankly. We're on a hill? And the car started going faster as I came down the hill? Him. Looks even more pissed off. You can't possibly be this stupid. Are you high? Me. No, I just work at a camp and the kids kept me up all night. I just want to go to bed. Him. If I run your license, am I going to find anything? Me. I got a ticket 3 years ago. Wasn't a moving violation. Parking ticket down the shore last summer. Him. We'll see about that. He ended up running my license and didn't find anything, and so he didn't give me a ticket, but did write me a warning and told me that he better not catch me speeding in his town ever again. I was much more careful on that hill from then on out. This was about 10 years ago, and my family still teases me for getting pulled over by a foot cop. I told this story to a friend who's a policeman, and he said that this guy probably effed up somehow, and that's why he pulled foot patrol in the summer, since that wasn't typical for this town. Story 49. Prison guard here and member of our special response team, sent to another prison for a shakedown. As I enter each cell to search, we first search the inmates and then move them to a secure holding area while we search their cell. I always ask if they have anything sharp hidden in their cell they can just give me ahead of time so I can avoid getting cut or punctured. Primarily, they'll give me their tattoo needles. I don't charge them, just toss them in the trash and move on. So recently, I'm going through the routine, and this inmate looks like a light bulb went on inside his head. So I ask what he has. He says he'll give me his tattoo needles. So he starts digging through his dirty laundry, pulls out a balled up dirty sock, starts unrolling it. I see a cord wrapped up in the sock as he starts to roll it back up, thinking I might not have seen. I say, "What's that?" And he suddenly looks deflated. I say, "Is that your tattoo gun?" And he just says, "Yes," and hands it to me. Then grabs another sock and hands me the needle. Clearly upset that he just gave up his hidden tattoo gun. He thought by giving me his needle from his dirty laundry, I wouldn't search it for anything else. Funniest thing I saw all day. Plus, I learned to search dirty laundry a little closer. Story 50. Criminal defense attorney. Tale of a colleague. Client comes in mad as hell and swears he was arrested wrongfully for a DUI. "Get the tape," he keeps crowing. "You'll see, they had no reason to arrest me." Client pays retainer. My buddy files for discovery, specifically asks for dashcam video. A week later, it arrives. I'm working 2 offices over, and I hear him screaming with laughter. He calls me back to his office, wiping tears from his eyes. "You gotta watch this." He was right. Buddy calls the defendant, tells him to come by the office. I have the tape. Defendant arrives. My buddy cues up the video and rotates for him to watch. Scene: side of a GA road. Cop: "Sir, can you step out of the car?" Def shakily gets out, holding onto the door for balance. Cop: "I believe you may be under the influence, sir. Have you been drinking?" Def: "No." Cop: "Do you mind doing a few sobriety tests for me?" Def: "Bring him on." Cop describes walk and turn test, showing clear white line in road. Def lines up, takes 2 steps, stumbles to right, takes 3 steps, stumbles to left. Def: "You know, this is hard for drunk people." My buddy stops the tape and stares at the client, stone-faced. Client: "Sorry, think you should plead me down?" Story 51. Not an officer, but myself and 2 buddies had just got off work and was headed to the bowling alley, making a quick pit stop at one of my friend's house. I make a right and get pulled over for the dumbest reason. Officer walks up and asks for my license and registration and the normal questions for 3 16-year-olds driving around at 1 a.m. Officer walks back up, hands me my ID, and proceeds to tell me he smells something in my car. I tell him respectfully, "No sir, nothing in here." Goes to my first friend and he responds the same. He then looks in the back to my second friend, and my friend instantly responds with, "I don't got no weed." At this point, my friend and I both facepalm ourselves as the officer is now calling him back up and asking more rounds of questions. He ended up having a J on him, which I knew about. The whole car got searched, and an hour later, we have to take my buddy home as his parents were called, but let the other friend and myself go. We never let his response down, and we got pulled over for profiling. My license plate light was never out, and the cop should not have seen it when he turned his lights on to pull me over. Story 52. Not an officer, but saw my stepmom give some terrible answers to cops. Somehow she's not arrested yet. Stepmom is getting irritated with the car in front of her driving way too slow. Speeds up and passes them. About 30 seconds later, cops are pulling her over. Officer: "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Stepmom: "I was trying to get past the a-hole in front of me." Officer: "Miss, I was that a-hole. Got off with no ticket." Once again, she's frustrated with traffic. She decided to drive onto the shoulder. There was a line of police cars on the shoulder 50 feet roughly ahead of us that we couldn't see. Cop looks at us like, "Are you serious?" and walks up to the car. Officer: "What the hell are you doing?" Stepmom: "I'm so sorry. I was just going to pass the car in front of me." Officer looks in the back seat where we have double-lapped kids, sees broken car mirror. "Give me 1 second." At this point, my stepmom is freaking out. Sure, she's going to jail. Officer: "Miss, I could give you over 15 tickets right now, but I'm in a good mood, so I'm going to let you off with a warning." Still don't know how she got away with that either. So just going out on a very sturdy limb here, I'm going to say that your stepmom is probably pretty attractive, or maybe has some sort of seductive appeal to her, because there's no way that she is batting 1,000 and getting off of tickets from doing stuff like this. Passing very rarely is worth it in these situations, guys. Don't do it. Story 53. Not a cop, but in high school, police, would bring dogs and walk them by cars outside, then through the school in search of drugs. Well, apparently the dogs claimed there were drugs in 2 cars, mine and the other kid in my grades. old Cadillac and an old Mercedes. And I was called to the office and was told they're going to search my car for drugs, and that since I was on school property, I had to let them do it. Still not 100% about this. But they asked me to search my car, and I was like, door's unlocked. Should I call my dad? No one answered, and a deputy started searching. As we were standing there, the other cops were asking me questions. They all knew me. Small town, small school, and I was in sports. Are there any drugs or anything else we need to know about? Me, not that I know of. Cops, what do you mean, not that you know of? And I've always been a sarcastic a-hole when people ask stupid questions, and I was like, what else could it mean? Then I kindly let them know that I had a large Bowie knife in the center console of my car. Our VP and one of my childhood teachers immediately asked for it and shoved it down the back of his pants. He didn't want me getting suspended for having a knife on school property. And sure enough, they didn't find anything. Completely dirtied up my car though and made me pick up all my crap off the ground. And when the searcher got out and was like, well, we didn't find anything this time, and started walking away, and the first thing to come to my mind, dude, aren't you gonna pick my stuff up? They didn't, but everything was okay. Story 54. Sitting at a red light in the middle of nowhere, Maine on a family vacation. The guy in front of us starts going and we followed. He had turned right on red and we had just gone straight. The car behind us immediately turned on the siren and pulled my father over for running a red. The cop was confused because we had stopped at the red like normal, but in broad daylight, in front of a cop had just kind of decided, nah, and rolled through it. We're from Montreal where there's no right on red, so you get pretty used to just following the driver before you. We explained our logic to the cop, who just seemed so baffled. He kinda awkwardly pauses for a minute, trying to calculate what he just heard, and finally he wished us a good trip and walked away. We still mock my father. Story 55. Not a cop, but I have a time where I regretted admitting something but was rewarded for it. One of my headlights were out and I was with my girlfriend. He pulled us over and asked me if I knew about it. I said I've known about it for about a month and just didn't have the money for it. He pauses, takes my ID, and goes back to his car, comes back and gets me to step out, then proceeds to show me how I can change it myself and tells me it would only cost like $15 versus a large ticket. I thought it'd cost more because I was told you had to take it to a shop. He let me go after that. Edit. I almost admitted to another officer that I was going 85 and a 65. I almost admitted when I saw him and knew he saw me too. I started slowing down so he could catch up to me easier. He gave me a ticket for not updating my license, which was only like $85 instead of speeding. Story 56. Story time. Okay, when I was about 16, my mom and I flew from Georgia to Baltimore for the weekend. Since our trip was only for a few days, our bags were fairly small. On the flight to Baltimore, we checked our bags, but flying home into Atlanta, my mom decided we would carry our bags on. Okay, no big deal. Except for that this was post 9/11 and my mom never told me that we weren't checking our bags. Fast forward about 45 minutes. We're in the TSA line and I'd completely forgotten about the giant can of hairspray in my bag. When it's my turn to go through security, I swear my TSA agent was actually a pro wrestler in disguise. Like, this dude was huge. So he scans my bag and says he's going to have to unpack it. I told him it was a can of hairspray and that I could just take it out and give it to him, but he insisted on unpacking my bag. Sure enough, he opens my bag and sitting right on top was my hairspray. He threw out the hairspray and made some comment about me being a bratty teenager or something like that. Y'all, I'm an a-hole, a sarcastic, deadpan, look you in your eye and say anything to anyone. He then proceeded to start unpacking the rest of my bag right there in the security area. I got mad and said, there's literally nothing else in there except my dirty clothes. He smirked up at me and said, well, ma'am, I did find contraband, so I'm going to have to search the rest of your bag. And before I could stop myself, I said, how the hell do you think a 16-year-old girl is going to take over a plane with hairspray? And that's the story of how I got thrown in TSA jail while government workers unpacked my bag and went through my phone. Meanwhile, my mom is having a nervous breakdown because her kid is in holding and we're going to miss our flight. Story 57. There's a time when I was the person saying something stupid. My friend and I were once out late driving around and listening to music. We were around 17, and we witnessed an awful hit-and-run accident. We were the only witnesses, so we pulled our car over and made sure that everyone in the accident, from the car that stayed, was all right. We then waited for the police and gave them statements describing the car that drove off and the damage it took. The car was described as a dark-colored minivan, having the front busted up from the collision. Well, after getting my information, the officer thanked us for our help and told us to be safe driving home. My buddy and I got back in his car and started heading back to his house. About 10 minutes later, we got pulled over. We were both fairly nervous as we had never been pulled over. The officer came up to our car and said, "What are you two doing out so late?" Both of us being nervous, we go straight into, "We're headed home from a hit-and-run accident." The police officer said, "Oh, really? Stay put, I'll be right back." He started walking away. We were proud of ourselves for handling that correctly, and we could hear the officer on his radio walking away from the car. That's when I realized we were currently driving in a dark blue minivan with a busted out front side due to my friend having hit the garage a few weeks prior. Eventually, we got all this straightened out after the officer had already radioed everyone else in the area, and he let us off without saying anything, even though we were technically out past curfew. Story 58. So, my dad was in the FBI for 20 some odd years. When he started, he was a field agent / SWAT guy, but he gradually transitioned to a more crime scene processing / investigative science side. But he has some of those crazy arrest stories. One was from when I was like 2 years old, so I don't actually remember this happening. We lived in not the greatest neighborhood in Connecticut. We were down the street from a bar, and there was a sharp concrete drop-off on the side of the street. So it was way too late at night / early in the morning. There was the roar of a motorcycle going entirely too fast, followed by a cacophony of smashing noises. Dad woke up, quickly threw some clothes on, and ran out to see what happened. And he grabbed his gun and cuffs, cause you never know. Guy who had a few too many had ridden his motorcycle over the embankment and slid for a considerable distance. His leg, well, let's just say his leg was all sorts of foobar now. But he was drunk enough that he didn't notice. He was trying to get his bike back upright and get back on it. "Buddy, you need help," my dad shouted. No, I'm fine. No, seriously, you need to go to the hospital." Dad knew this guy was clearly a DUI, but didn't really care about that at this point, because, hey, more important serious medical things going on with this guy. No, don't call 911. "Buddy, you seriously need to go to the hospital." "No 911, I'm not supposed to be here." Well, that got my dad's attention. Dad didn't press him on it, but the guy continued. "Ex-girlfriend has a restraining order, not supposed to be anywhere near here." Whoops. Story 59. Not a police officer, but one of the people in the story. I was relatively sober, but my buddy was super hammered. Walked to our dealer's place late at night. On our way back, my friend is pretending to kick cars and mirrors and stuff, just joking around. Suddenly, some guy came flying up to us and started berating my buddy for breaking cars. He was so drunk he couldn't form much of a coherent defense as to his pretending to do it. So I point out that he wasn't actually making contact, and none of the cars are damaged. He points out that many of the cars on the block were damaged, and cops were coming. Turns out, somebody had been smashing car mirrors and tires on that block that night. Police officers were interrogating my friend, keeps us separate, calls me over, and I explain we were walking back from a friend's house. Apologize for my friend's state of mind, being he wasn't 21. Officer looks at me and just goes, "Get your drunk-ass friend home." I reply, "Yes, sir," and get out of there real quick. Turns out the guy who was breaking our car mirrors, etc., was a different friend of mine that wasn't with us that night. Story 60. I had a car with limo tint all around and would always roll the windows down around the cops. One day I missed one and she pulls me over. I thought maybe it was for something else, so I had the windows down when she walked up. She says, "Sir, roll your window halfway up." She puts a light meter on and of course it fails. She runs my license and says, "Damn, you're suspended too?" She then says, "If I had more time, I'd write you a mess of tickets, but I have to go. Do you have someone to pick you up? Because I can't let you drive." She ends up calling my girlfriend and she says, "If I come by here again, I better not see you driving." So I waited till my girlfriend and her mom came and drove me and my car home. No tickets. Story 61. Probably not my proudest moment, but one time I was home on leave and I went out to the bars. I had a taxi and everything, but I really had to use the bathroom. I walked into an alleyway and proceeded to go. Well, 2 officers spotted me. While I was getting my ticket, I caught the second officer on his cell phone. I whispered to the first officer, who was writing the ticket, what his partner was doing. He got his partner off the phone. I then catch his partner on his phone again. I whisper to the first officer who's writing the ticket. Well, the second officer had to go sweep the alleyway. Once I was handed my ticket, the first officer and I joked around a little and then I left. I'm happy with my $250 ticket as I didn't realize, a year prior, My home state passed a law where any public urination is grounds for indecent exposure, which can be a sex offender status. At least that's what I was told. This was back in 2010. Story 62. Not really answering the prompt, but a funny story nonetheless. Once, my now ex-boyfriend and I were parked in a parking lot that overlooks a river. Just teens innocently listening to the radio around 10 p.m. or so. A cop rolled up and knocked on the window to tell us the park we were at was closed and probably just make sure we weren't having sex. My boyfriend was a pot dealer at the time, and his car always smelled like weed, even when he wasn't carrying any. The cop starts asking us if we've been smoking. We hadn't, if we had any marijuana on us, etc. My ex-BF is a nervous guy of mixed race, so he's overly eager to comply with the officer. He starts flipping through compartments on the dashboard to prove there's no paraphernalia stashed anywhere, confident that there's nothing illegal in the vehicle. When the cop goes, "What's in that plastic bag in the cup holder?" and my heart falters. I watch a split second of anxious uncertainty flash across my BF's face, and he lifts up the baggie to the light to reveal salted almonds, sir. I had to fight to keep a straight face. The cop just starts laughing, cracks some jokes, and tells us to get the F out of there. We peel off a bit rattled, and I tell my BF he should double check to make sure he doesn't have any substances in the car. He insists he doesn't, but feels around anyways, and immediately proceeds to pull an eighth out of the center console. Thank God that baggie wasn't discovered, as after finding it, we were both understandably less certain about what a search might have revealed to be in the trunk. Story 63. Not a cop, but I have a Canadian border story from my high school. School band was taking a trip to march in a parade in Canada. At the border, going into Canada from Washington, the Canadian Border Patrol asks the usual questions when they get to the bus in a loud, clear voice. Does anyone have any weapons, drugs, or other illegal substances or contraband of any kind in this bus? One kid says, "Coke!" and holds up a can of Coke. The bus was completely stripped, almost down to the frame, and they were detained for the remainder of the day at the border. No word on if anyone went to the special building where you end up with your pants down around your ankles or not. Canadian Border Police, zero sense of humor. Story 64. I live in Eastern Europe, so it's post-Soviet Union country, so you can pay off a lot of cops. I was around 19. I was driving to a beach party, and I was late. I had to work that day. All my friends were already there, so I was in a rush because one of my friends was leaving the country to go to America for hockey. I was pulled over for driving 90 kmph in a 50 kmph. By the new rules, you lose your license if you go 90 and 50, so I knew I'm effed. The cop said, "You know you're gonna lose your license, right?" as I'm giving him my license and registration papers. And there's no way I could lose my license because I was going to America as well in a couple weeks. So the only way to keep my license was offering him some money, but you can't just go like, "Here's some money, let me go." I asked if there's some way he can solve this. "Let's see your insurance papers," he said. So I tore apart my whole car and I couldn't find them. Called my dad to ask where he put the insurance papers. They can look it up online from their computers. You don't need them in your car. So I went to their police car because the guy went back to his car, and I told him that they can see my insurance stuff online. As his facial expressions changed to, "What an idiot this guy is." So he said, "Okay, I'm taking away your license." That was the moment I realized he's asking for money. I found a weird piece of paper and 25 euros, handing him 25 euros under the paper saying, "That's all the insurance I have." He let me go. Sorry for my grammar. As you can see, English is not my native language. Story 65. Late to the party, but here's my story. I'm at this weird intersection making a left turn. There's an officer in the car to my left, sitting and watching the traffic. The intersection is a crossroad and a T-junction that has right-of-way. I pulled up. The traffic to my right has just got a green light and aren't yet moving. Mind you, they are a bit of a distance away too. And the T-junction has a red light. I slow down and make my red turn peacefully. In my rear view, I see the cop gunning after me. Not at all casually. You can tell he isn't pleased. Pulls me over on a bridge and comes over with this WTF expression with a smile. It's at this moment I realized that I had to wait for the red light that was on for the traffic coming from my direction. However, I thought when making a left turn, I only have to let other drivers through. You know why I stopped you, kid? I guess I was supposed to stop at that red light. I have this stupid face on because I've just realized this. I immediately give him my driver's license and the registration. Guess I deserved a ticket. I honestly never stopped at the red light over there. Thought I'd just let other cars pass and move on. Yeah, you were supposed to stop at a red light. There's no traffic camera watching the intersection. He's laughing at this stage. Alright, pull over from the bridge and we'll deal with this. He actually stopped me on top of the bridge, which is a no-no in my country. I exit the bridge and get out of my car. We can do that. He approaches me, hands me back my documents. Don't feel like writing you a ticket. You admitted to your fault and didn't argue about the whole situation. Officer, I don't want you to get in any sort of trouble for not giving me a ticket for this, so I honestly don't mind. Cops back there rarely do this expecting some sort of reward. They're a bit corrupt. I'm also strictly against corruption, so there was no way for me to pay him. I also don't have any cash on me. Not everything is measured with money. Stay safe. I was seriously shocked after what he said to me, because most of the times police officers either write you a ticket or negotiate a deal. Story 66. I'm not a police officer, nor the person that said something stupid. I'm a friend of the person who said something stupid, who witnessed the whole thing. So when I was in university, I got drunk with a few friends and we went to a nightclub. I don't remember exactly what happened, but we got into some sort of altercation with a guy dressed up as a teenage Ninja Turtle. We kind of pushed each other around and he went for my face, gouging my eye with his fingers. I promptly left the club with one of my friends who escorted me to hospital. While we were in the waiting room, 2 police officers showed up holding this girl who was completely out of it. She had taken MDMA/ecstasy and was probably overdosing because she was freaking out and not understanding what was happening. The police officer sat her down on the chair and stood guard. My friend, who was very drunk, thought it was a good idea to go talk to the police. He started telling them how mean they are and how all she needs is a glass of water and a hug, and took his phone out and started filming them. Safe to say they kicked him out of the hospital. Although he didn't regret it immediately, he did when I told him what had happened the next day. He's lucky all they did was kick him out. Story 67. Not exactly related to the question, but when my mom was young, 8 or so, her sisters and mother and father went for a Sunday drive. They stopped along the way for KFC and ate in while driving. When they were all finished, they asked their father what they should do with the buckets of chicken bones, and his response was, just throw it out the window, which they promptly did. A few seconds go by, and then a police officer pulls them over. When he gets up to the car, he asks the obvious question. Do you know why I pulled you over today? My grandfather decides to play dumb and says, no, officer, I have no idea. Cop, well, you just littered by throwing your KFC buckets out the window. My grandfather pauses for 1 second, then comes up with the most amazing line. Those damn kids, you tell them one thing and they go ahead and do the other. My mom and her sisters very quickly go to defend what they've been accused of. But Dad, this is when my grandmother turns around and starts telling her 3 daughters to shut up. Miraculously, my grandfather avoided getting the ticket. You know, the art of improv, being able to think on your feet. If nothing else, it makes you a better conversationalist, but in situations like this, being able to just quickly talk your way out of trouble is just masterclass. Love it. Story 68. I'm 16 years old, walking with a friend to a local lake along Main Road when a traffic car goes by, and I say to my friend rather loudly, blah, blah, pigs. I have no idea what I said, as I'd never said before or since, but it popped out. What I did not see was the police van behind it with windows open as the van goes by, and then it slams on the anchors and I hear hard reversing, and I continue walking onto Lake Car Park. I hear the van coming in behind me with the passengers shouting, "You in the blue coat, stop!" I look down and realize I'm in the blue coat. I turn around to see 6 police getting out of the van and 3 police getting out of the car. My friend mutters he's out of there. I get surrounded by the officers, with the driver of the van and passenger of the van asking me what I said. I'm looking around at these officers, thinking, what the F? So I say, look, let's get this over with, and start taking my shoes and socks off, and then my coat. At which point, the 3 police closest to me ask what I'm doing, and I said, well, I know this will lead to a strip search at some point, so getting ahead of the game here. Can one of you hold my coat and t-shirt while I get my belt off? I'm praying that I'm not going to be stark bollock naked soon. One of the policemen at the back stepped forward and said, we know what you said. Just remember, if your house is burgled or your mom is attacked, who are the first people you would call? I did not expect that response at all, considering all their postures, at which point they all turned around and left. I would like to say thank you to that officer, as I had a counter-argument whenever someone bickered about the police with no evidence why. Story 69. My dumb friends admitted to trespassing after hours and drinking in a park. How is the awesome part? The friends wanted to go play frisbee golf in the evening after it got dark, hoping to show off a neat trick, so I said I'm in. They bought a bottle of vodka, OJ, and some glow sticks. The idea is to break open a glow stick, pour it on a frisbee, and throw it through a reasonably dense forest. It flies everywhere and lights up the trees like stars. Probably better high than drunk, but this is a story about inexperienced kids. There's 6 of us, about 20 to 26. My brother and his girlfriend, who were underage at the time, were along. We had a good time throwing frisbees and drinking up until about hole 12 when we saw the headlights of a car pulling into the park, 100 yards across a field from us. The eldest among us, Jay, I'll call him, took point and we walked back towards the parking lot to meet them, because our car was there and we're already caught. For my ego, I'll note I'd told them we shouldn't park there. Jay directs one of the other guys, Jer, who wasn't the sharpest spoon in the drawer, to toss the vodka in a trash can on the way. Jay's coaching us, telling us not to say anything, saying he'll handle the officer, and try to establish a good connection. We don't want to get the kids in trouble for alcohol. As we near the lot, we see an officer getting out of the car, and Jay announces, "Good evening, sir," and the officer turns her flashlight on us, saying, "It's not sir, it's ma'am." And that sets the tone for the rest of the interaction. She collects our IDs and goes to run them. The 2 youngest don't provide IDs, saying they don't have them. While waiting, we're all quietly conversing, and Jay wants to stay cool, so he gets the officer's attention and starts slowly waving his hands at his pocket, pointing. He was afraid of getting shot. He asks, "Officer, I'd like to get a cigarette from my pocket. It's right here. I need to get a lighter, too." He's moving his hands in large, slow gestures, like he's trying to flag down an airliner that's landing. Now, we didn't want to get my brother and girlfriend into trouble, so Jay was telling everyone not to say anything the whole time. The officer had radioed for backup already, and another officer showed up after a minute or two while she's running the IDs. Officer number 2 walks up to us, and the first thing he says, "You kids been drinking?" And without skipping a beat, Jer answers, cheerful as can be, "Yes, officer, and it's right over there in that trash can." Grinning maniacally, they just sort of stare at us. I don't know what the officers thought of us. They must have worried a little for the future. Anyway, we got off with just trespassing tickets from the local muni. We never let Jay or Jer off the hook for this. And for the record, I don't recommend you do the glow stick thing. The chemicals are toxic and not good for the environment. But perhaps LED frisbees at night would still be a lot of fun. Story 70. Was my friend in the back seat going to get some food. Was driving at night on my birthday, maybe 8 p.m., and to avoid a pothole, I swerved a little and then the great blue and red lights came on. I crossed the double rainbow lines and the police officer was asking questions about the car. Was 17, dumb car, had tints and such. Everything was going well and 2 friends sitting there answering cops' questions and everything looks good. Then he asked my friend in the back seat, "Officer, your friend in the back has no seatbelt." Me turned to friend and asked, "Dude, come on. Sorry, officer, he's putting it on now. I don't know why he didn't wear it." Officer to my friend, "Sir, what's going to save you if your friend crashes?" Friend, "I'm wearing a puffy jacket, sir." Me, "I'm gonna kill you." Other friend, facepalm. Office, "I'll be right back with that ticket. Cost me $80. Great time and idiot friends. Only got a ticket for that seatbelt. Probably could have been avoided. On mobile. Sorry for spelling. Story 71. 1977, rural Georgia. It was late and some friends and I, 17 years old, were pulled over for a DUI check, and the cop, who was a real jerk from the initial contact, said, "Do you have drugs in the car?" We had been smoking and drinking earlier, but we were on our way home and mostly sober, just tired. I answered, "No, sir." He then said, "Well, you won't mind me searching your car." I said, "No, sir, you may not search my car." He said, "Son, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Either you let me search your car or I'll take it apart until I find the drugs," which made no sense to me, but I think he was just enjoying being an a-hole to a kid that he obviously had dead to rights on a DUI. My reckless response was, "Sir, if you take my car apart, then you'll have to put it back together." I'm so lucky he didn't stop on the way to jail and beat my smart-ass teen self up and claim I fell. Yes, there was a joint in the ashtray, and no, I was not charged with possession. Not sure why not, seeing as he likely had probable cause, and could have searched the car anyway. This set the tone for the rest of my life on how I feel about Southern cops. Story 72. First time I got pulled over at 19 with 2 friends in the car. All were a little stoned, and it was 2 a.m. on a Monday morning, the week before Christmas. First mistake I made was getting out of the car. Never been pulled over before, so don't know the protocol. Me, "Is there a problem?" C, "Where have you been?" Me, "At my friend's house. We've all just come back from uni and been hanging out playing video games." C, "What's his address?" Me, two. Oi, lads, what the F's the name of his road? In my head, why did you just say F? C, "Who owns the car?" Me, my old man. C, what's his name? Me, says his name. C, where are you going? Me, dropping a friend off, then I'll be back to village name. C, what's the address of where the car is registered? Me, first line of address. C, in village? Me, yes, obviously. Why the F did you just say obviously? C, okay, you may go. Me, thank you, have a good night. Got in and drove away slowly. He then followed me for 2 miles back to my friend's place and then disappeared. Story 73. Not a police officer, but I was working on a short film with some friends for which we had a 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. call time, and I was running late. I was speeding to get to the set, and I realize I blow past a cop and see him pull out onto the road behind me. Luckily, I'm going fast enough that I establish a little distance between us, so I make a right into a development off the main road and sort of wait it out. Nothing happens. I exhale relieved and make it to the set. Sometime after that incident, I'm at a friend's house after having too many beers. Then it's time to drive home. I know, I'm a stupid idiot. And on the way, my song comes on, so I start speeding again. I blow past another cop and sort of try the same thing I did before and go down a small road. But this time I didn't establish much distance between the cop and myself, so I make it worse by pulling into someone's driveway, which is when he puts his lights on and I stop. He comes to the driver's side and says, "License and registration, please," which I give to him. "Do you know why I stopped you?" he asked. "I was going too fast," I reply. "Do you live at the house you pulled into?" "No, sir." "Why'd you pull in here?" "To get away from you," I answered, terribly and kind of with a chuckle. I ended up with only a speeding ticket, even though I probably should have gotten in trouble for evading an officer, not to mention I was over the limit. Anyways, I fought the ticket and won due to poor signage. Story 74. The bourgeoisie and the proletariat. The bourgeoisie are essentially the rich and powerful of society who control everything. Business owners and politicians. These people make decisions in their own favor at the expense of others. E.g., I'm going to earn $1 million a year, but I'll pay my workers as little as possible. Cops reinforce that system by enforcing the laws. These laws hurt everybody who isn't rich and powerful, including cops themselves. Is your pension too low, or your salary, or your hourly wage? Are you fighting for benefits and having them denied by people who don't understand what it's like to be in your position? Are you in bad health because you can't afford good health insurance? All of these are the result of decisions made by the rich and powerful. Insurance companies want to make money and don't give a F if you die for preventable reasons. Bosses will pay themselves more because they can, and why wouldn't they? All of these truths that most people see and admit in their everyday lives, but a lot of us also have a weird faith in the system at times and don't realize the contradiction. If a poor person robs Walmart because they're starving and the cops arrest them, what's essentially happening is that a multi-million-dollar corporation is being protected while the poor person is being punished for not accepting their fate of starvation. That person, who may be poor for reasons that are a direct result of the system itself, because the person might work a crappy job and doesn't get paid enough, or they have no support system, etc. There are a few people in this world who have so much and so many people who have so little, and the cops make sure the system stays that way. Story 75. I'm a nanny, and while working with placement agencies, a lady who owned a small company in NYC went off about one of her neighbors/peers. She whined about how this lady was lucky she married well, and that their little coffee business was doing well, etc. And that who does she think she is, and that her family has a house in the East Hamptons too, all because I found her neighbor through another agency, and she couldn't understand why they didn't use her instead. But then she scoffed, but maybe it was because I went to Mar-a-Lago for New Year's Eve. I asked if my potential employer was a Democratic, and she scoffed again. Oh yeah, big time. Just Google their philanthropy work. And then she says, "Oh, I shouldn't be telling you this. This could derail my whole career. This lady has not called me since, and I have a trial with her neighbor tomorrow. LOL.